Scott is missing the work session today.
Oh, he is. Okay.
Okay, so we have everybody that's going to be here for the work session, right?
Yes.
Correct.
Okay, so let's go ahead then and call the Johnston. Minute. See the number on this. Oh, here we go. We'll call the Johnston City Council work session number 20-16 order. Cindy, roll call, please.
Councilmember Cope,
Yes.
Evans,
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Ready,
Yep.
Soroka.
Okay, we have two discussion items this evening. The first one is to review ripples, scales, and lighting. And I'm assuming that is Adam.
Yes, Mayor.
Okay, take it away.
All right. I think Cindy's going to enable my control here, and I'll get a couple things pulled up.
I will. Give me just a second, Adam. I got to move these other people over for you here.
Sure thing. They're actually talking on the next item, so we'll be all right on this one. The last work session, City Council discussed the ripples lighting potential, as well as a couple of different varieties of scales for the piece. Just to review where we're currently at, pull this up here. We have a contract with artist Ronaldo Carrero for $132,715.69 for the construction of the piece. And the design, once it downloads here, the design as it stands currently has about 150 square feet of scales on it in a vertical fashion. I think some folks have kind of referred to it as a kind of sushi look to it. Ronaldo has provided a couple of different alternatives, each with kind of an escalating cost to provide some different ideas of how that could look if there's a desire to move in that direction. Well, Cindy, it doesn't look like that's wanting to pull open for me.
Which one, Adam? Oh, it's just not sharing. Hang on one second. Yeah. How about now, Adam?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So the one that's outlined in red is sort of the preference that council expressed at the last time. So there you can see the scales sort of going in that vertical fashion. There would only be the metal connecting wire, which is not shown in these pictures, on the areas in which those scales are shown. And then this is also being shown with the LED color changing lights. There was some discussion on that of trying to match some of the other lighting schemes that will be taking place in the town center. And so this would give us the most diversity of use and be able to match that or pair it with different events or different color schemes that might happen throughout the year. Initially, IMEC had given us a estimated cost for this lighting at $46,332. After revisiting that and getting the actual price components in there, they have revised that cost down to $30,800. So that would be the exact same lighting scheme as we talked for before. It's just a little bit more refined estimate on that. So that is good news. And then the second option that we had discussed, but the preference was for the colored one, was just kind of that cool white look to it. So this wouldn't be changing colors. The cost estimate for that one did also decrease as well, down to $16,900. And see if pull open the other one here. So the three different options that Ronaldo has provided us here this evening is the 40% scales with a more of a scattered look to it. So again, you're not seeing the actual wire that would connect these scales, but that would be somewhat predominant when you review the piece. But this has the same amount of scales as proposed in kind of the sushi look there, only having them randomly dispersed. And the cost on that one would be $143,500. This is its appearance with the LED lights at night. The second one is he looked at increasing the percentage of scales up to about 66, 2/3 of the piece being covered with the scales. Again, going with that kind of distributed pattern. That would be a price increase up to $154,500. Again, a look here at the nighttime with the LED lights. And then the final one is going back to sort of the original concept that was presented by the artist with fully scaling the piece while still having that opening in the front half as well as kind of the smaller opening in the back half to allow kids to crawl through. So this would be the same price as originally proposed, the $161,021. The artist does prefer this one here, the one with the total scale coverage. That was sort of what he had originally envisioned for the piece, but has expressed that his understanding certainly of the cost considerations are out there. And I think his belief is that any three of these options, four of these options, including the sushi look, would all still give a very good visual feel and provide some of that reflecting light off of those scales. So really just looking for council kind of decision on this of which direction to move. Any cost increased on this, as well as the cost for the lighting, would come out of the owner contingency bucket of the town center project, of which there is still room, although we have been adding a few things in here, and we're expecting another update, I think, from Dave here within the next month or so on where things stand with the ice rink and some of the additional enhancements that have taken place there over the last couple of months. So that's the information I have for you. Really just kind of looking for direction on this.
Hey, Adam, can you, sorry.
Go ahead.
Can you go
Go ahead.
can you go to the last page on that? I know there's that one.
Well, Adam, when I reviewed them prior to this meeting, I tended to favor the one that was at 67%. It felt more artistic to me than the first one. It needed more of the whatever those scales than the first one has. But I thought that the third one, which apparently the artist prefers, just looks very dense. I mean, it doesn't. It kind of loses its aesthetic appeal to me because it just looks very dense. So I'd be curious why he likes that one best.
Unfortunately, he is still without internet and wasn't able to join us tonight. But I guess I didn't ask him specifically why he preferred that one, other than that was sort of the original intent of the piece.
What are others' thoughts?
I'm fine with the 67% one, the one you identified, Mayor. I'm pretty agnostic, on this. So 60, I really can go with any of the. I like the 67, probably the best as well. So I'm good with that.
So in my opinion, I'm not an artist. I don't very well recognize all of those things. As an engineer, I can tell you in a geometric fashion, the last 100% looks really attractive to me as an engineer. That's when I look at it. But that's my opinion.
So I would like to make sure I understand. Our current price for this piece from the artist is $102,715 and some cents. And it's 40% scales, but they're kind of this striped, or you refer to sushi effect. If we take those same 40% coverage in the scales, but scatter it, it's a increase in $11,000. Is that correct?
That's correct, because of the additional wire that would need to be strung.
Well, my opinion is I agree with the mayor 100% in her evaluation of the three options were shown, that the 67% seems to fit the bill the best. Not totally making the piece opaque, but adding more finished effects than the 40%. So I agree with that. Was there any savings in the lighting proposal? I couldn't quite understand that, Adam.
Yes, the cost of the red, green, blue, or the red, green, blue lighting would now be 30,800. The original cost estimate was 46,332. So that cost did go down about $16,000.
So if we make the decision to go with the 67%, and you combine that decision with the lighting decision, we're adding another $4,000 or $5,000 to what was discussed the last time the council met. If you add both of those things together, we got a savings in our lights, but we are going up in number of scales. I guess I'm still okay with the 67%.
Fine with me.
Jim would rather have a live fit.
Or like, no, it's good.
All right. Well, if that's the direction, then it sounds like there's kind of a majority opinion on the 67%. I'll communicate that back to the artist, and we'll work on getting the adjustments made to the contract.
Okay, we have one other agenda item this evening, and that is a review of the town center branding. And I assume that's Adam as well.
Yes, that's me as well here. I think internet seems to be struggling a little bit with loading the page. There we go. So again, the last work session discussion we had was specifically about the monument sign that had come out of discussion at the committee that morning. But there was some additional discussion on the logo for the town center. And so we wanted to bring Juicebox in to have a little more conversation about what the process was for that logo and the overall town center branding. And then kind of go back to some of the monument sign discussion with OPN and see if we can't land someplace on that. Before I invite Juicebox to come and kind of walk through their presentation, I'll just give you a little bit of contextual background, I guess, on the process we went through. July of last year, we started with some town center amenities committee discussions, looking at branding, looking at a variety of different logos. We went through several different iterations of what those logos and that branding and the text might look like. And this was, of course, while we're also still working through some of the name ideas for the town center and for the yard. And then in fall, it came in front of council with kind of the final recommendation of that logo, as well as a few different ways you could frame that logo and the text of the yard or the town center, which Juicebox will walk through. But that did come in line with a bunch of other town center discussion points as well. So there's kind of a lot being thrown at council at that point. One of those logos we looked at did involve sort of a tree branch or a small tree. That one got kind of pulled back for a variety of reasons, and maybe we can talk about that after Juicebox's presentation. And then, of course, those committee discussions were also prior to the election. So there's been sort of various degrees of involvement from different elected officials, both past and present, in some of those committee discussions, as well as sort of the decision being made before the full current council was in place as well. Kind of into the winter of last year, this logo and the name have been used predominantly in the website and in the real estate marketing materials. So that is sort of out there. It certainly can change, but there is some sort of historical context in that brand that has started to been pushed out and is familiar for at least some folks out there. So with that, I'll invite Juice Box to kind of walk through the yard brand direction PDF that we have here. And hopefully, Jamie, are you getting us going?
It'll actually be Joran, and she should be here as well, but she'll kind of talk you through her process. So she was the designer who worked all the way through the logo and the designs and the iterations. So can kind of talk a little bit about how she came to that, and then also the decisions that were reached in various conversations.
Yep. So if you just want to be my navigator, I'll just walk through kind of where we had left off months ago. So this is just kind of a quote that kind of summarizes where we were kind of aiming to be. So just says, you know, if people believe that they share values with a company, they will stay loyal to the brand. That's a Starbucks quote, but kind of this idea that, you know, if you feel like you fit in this community and there's something for everybody kind of a thing, then this is kind of how we envision the town center being a place where, you know, kids can come and play in the ice rink or just be outside, host concerts or events. And at the same time, you can have a sporting, you know, game on at a bar or something and have a drink. And there's going to be offices, the city hall, bike trail going through there. So it's really a hub for lots of different people. So it's kind of a unique place in the metro area that you can kind of call your own place. So anyway, this is just kind of summarizing that concept, I suppose. So early on, we just did a lot of explorations. This could do a snapshot, just a brief snapshot of kind of all over the board where we were exploring different concepts. And like he mentioned, starting with knowing that Johnston has their leaf logo and they've kind of got a system that's working really well for them. So we kind of aimed that way. And at this point, we were kind of exploring, you know, do we aim more for the elegant side? Do we go more chill, low key, somewhere in the middle? What feels right to us based on kind of the discussions about the name that we're going to decide on, and then what this brand is going to evolve to be. So all over the board there. And then as we move forward, you'll see just kind of where our mark kind of comes. So this is a little bit deeper snapshot for you guys, but really exploring those leaf shapes. These tend to be a little bit more elegant just because they've got the curves and the points. Nothing wrong with that, but this is just where we started. And then as we evolved, you'll see we simplified it a little bit. So as we had these discussions, we aimed more towards what are those like keywords that are representing who we want this town center to be. So those were collaborative, adaptive, and energized. So we just started playing with what types of symbols kind of represented those themes. So we've got sort of like a town center and links, knowing that we had the name, the Johnston Town Center, kind of rolling around what kind of fit that. And then we had this other one that was kind of more ball yards and diamonds. But what we liked about that is that it's kind of like we said, you could go there and watch a baseball game or something like that on the TV, but you could also go shopping. So you've kind of got the feminine and masculine side of it as well. And it's not too much of either, it kind of blends both, but it has sort of duplicative meanings between each of those marks. So we went a step deeper and just kind of, you know, where did the lines break? Which objects are filled versus open? What do we feel like fits the best, and how does that translate across? You know, like on a website, you've got a fave icon, which is a very small icon at the top of your browser tab, to expanding it into a full signage effect like we're kind of dealing with now. So kind of thinking through that. And then where we landed was this one here. This is just showing you the anatomy of how we've kind of created that and kept it, you know, cohesive throughout the piece. And then you can go ahead. Then we kind of paired it with some type. So at this time, we're also debating, you know, do you call it the yard? Do you call it Johnston Town Center? Because we kind of had gone back and forth a little bit to kind of figure out what we felt like was right. And we kind of nixed the elegant side of it and went for a little bit more of a universal welcome open text that was a sans serif. So clean lines, spacious enough, it's very easy to read, that kind of thing. Felt like it fit all audiences pretty well, and it had that a little bit more of that energized and collaborative feel as opposed to a little bit more of the fine, refined edges with the serif. So we put it together. We wanted to keep the Johnston Town Center as a piece of it, but ultimately we felt like, you know, people might in conversation say, hey, meet me at the yard, meaning like, you know, the open space with the restaurants all around, or the event would be hosted at the yard. So we kept that as the primary text, and then we incorporated the subtext Johnston Town Center with that. We obviously had the URL Johnston Town Center at the time. That name was kind of floating around internally, and we hadn't fully branded it outward yet, but we felt like we could combine the two and make it work. So this is kind of where we ended with that. So just some variations of how it kind of could look. And obviously we had not at this point explored signage on the building or any of the other components other than what we were going to do next, which was the website. So it's kind of nice to have a mark that's versatile. So like here we have just the yard and it's a little more playful, and maybe you're doing a poster or an event and that can kind of be a piece that you use. So I felt like you could kind of come up with something that fit whatever you were working on at the time. So typography then, I think this just goes a little deeper for if you're interested. There's the font that we're using, kind of how we apply that to different mediums that we're working with. So just a sample of that there. And then color, where we landed on that. This is kind of a nice snapshot of what's in the area. So as we're thinking through our palette, what's being used, how are they doing it? You can also consider naming, because at the time we were kind of, do we call it the yard? Do we call it Johnston Town Center? Where do we land on that? So interesting to see, how they're kind of exploring their different palettes and the vibe that they bring to those areas too. So with us, we kind of knew Johnston is unique. It kind of was founded upon agriculture as a baseline for industries there, and kept that in mind with the Midwest. So pulled from those, wheat gold and the deep green that you can use, and then paired it with some complementary colors that worked well. So what we like about this is it kind of brings that feminine side, but also the masculine side. And then you can kind of usually pair the green with any of those colors to make it work. So in the holidays, you could use the red and the green. Valentine's Day, you've got the pink and the red, things like that that are going to be very seasonal for a place like this. So that's where we ended up with the colors. And these are just some samples of kind of how they look in full screen effect there, different palettes. Primary would probably always be the emerald green color. So you'll see a lot of that in this document. But okay, and then these are just some examples, I'm pretty sure, of how we're kind of exploring what could be. So as we're thinking through, is this the right fit for the brand? How could we apply it? So we've got it on a mug there. We've got just sample images for how we could, if you're going to expand into photography, what that might look like and how you might overlap, that what I would call the badge logo is the circle one to adapt. You might explore stamps because maybe it's got a little bit of that rustic, like you're in the grass, kind of playful feel to it that way with that mark. And then on the website, we've added some animation or some illustration to it. So you'll see a lot of that in the social media as well. It's kind of a good fit because it is pretty easy to incorporate. And then as we were thinking about it, if there was some stones in the concrete or something like that, you could explore that diamond pattern kind of fitting in to the town center itself. And then these were just some fun, if we are talking about families and, you're biking down the trail and you kind of see this signage or this sculpture or something, I wanted it to be very inviting. So, some ideas like that where it kind of encourages interactivity in some way, or climbing, or anything sort of like that was kind of where we were thinking that this place could potentially become. So some neat ideas there. Could be a bike rack or who knows, but that's where we were exploring at the time. So I think that's most everything I've got in this document. So I can open it back up to questions or bring it back to Adam.
Any questions on the presentation? Otherwise, we can keep going. I think maybe we give a little more context. We did sit back down with Juicebox staff in Hanson and Juicebox and kind of talk through the process and where we're at today versus some of the discussion points that occurred early on. I think there was some discussion of maybe the city logo should be involved more predominantly, either on the sign or as part of the branding. Maybe Janet can speak a little bit more to this as far as city use of that or some of the issues that might present. But I think the overall conversation that we had with Hanson was where we landed is kind of what we've been using. It seems to kind of suit the purposes, and it is a new brand, so it's not out there. It doesn't have a presence that's been out there for years, but we're in the process of creating that brand and that association over time as the town center is built out and people start recognizing this symbol as something that's associated with that. but welcome any other staff to provide comment as well.
Yeah, this is Janet, and I'll just comment in regards to the credibility of our brand. During the last council meeting, I know we had incorporated the Johnston logo, and to me, that's a little bit concerning because if some businesses come in there and say they want to do a promotion for a weekend and they use our city logo, that would almost have to be policed every single time. They use it on a flyer or any social media pages to make sure that they're not stretching out our city logo and using it in manners that they're not supposed to. So that is a little concerning to me if we do decide to go that direction, just because I don't want to use the credibility of our Johnston, that brand with the tree. And that's it, unless anybody has any additional questions for me.
Can you go back to the graphic? I'm sorry, it looks like it came up, of showing what some of the other areas around the metro, what their branding is.
Here's another one.
Around the Des Moines Metro, though, I guess. I guess some of those were the Des Moines Metro. There you go. So when I look at this, and we're all familiar with where all these are, and none of them are really identified by the city or by the city logo, sort of getting to Janet's point that, if the East Village is going to have an event, they would use the East Village logo rather than using the City of Des Moines logo, which may come up with some other problems. And so, when I look at this, once I think things start happening and people sort of identify with all these different areas, certainly the Johnston Town Center is a part of Johnston, but I think people will call it the town center or Johnston Town Center or the yard or those types of things, and people will identify with it, just like people identify with all these brands, which are all located in other communities around Johnston. So this helped me sort of think through that after we had the conversation at the last city council meeting when we had the meeting with Juicebox. This really helped me sort of focus on what the yard and what the town center becomes for Johnston, as these areas have been, part of other metro communities.
I'm certain that I was probably part of the group that had this presentation made to us previously. I don't remember all of this, but I guess hearing it again, it reinforces to me that we're headed in the right direction. I think the design works. Chief Clark just sent us a note saying that diamonds are a kind of a feature in rail yards, and of course that's part of what we're trying to play off of here in developing our identity as our former connection with the interurban trail, or rail line. But I also, the colors make sense to me now that I'm reminded of how we got here, just in terms of our agricultural background and the pulling from fields and the whole idea of us being a green community and having been a green community for many, many years. So, I'd forgotten some of this. I'm glad that I've been reminded of it, and I like the direction that we're headed with this.
Yeah, I still hate it, but and here's the frustrating thing for me about it is that I think we're mixing completely. If you go back to the slide that Jim referenced about that had the East Village or had Jordan Creek Mall, all of those are private locations. Those are all, none of those places have major government buildings and government infrastructure at the center of their, of that location. The outlets of Des Moines, East Village, Prairie Trail, Jordan Creek, West Glen Town Center, all of those are shopping, focused on shopping and some entertainment. Here, the town center has City Hall, and it has an entertainment venue, and that entertainment venue is primarily a public, operated entertainment venue. And so, but we don't in any way tie with the logo back to the fact that that there's some tie to the city. And so we're almost sort of like, we spent a bunch of time thinking through a logo that reflects the city, and now I'm fine with, we don't want it to be exactly what the city logo is, but there's no connection to it. It's a 180-degree difference from where we are as a city. If at least there was some relative connection to it, where you could see Johnston and think, and some tie to it. And so this presentation started off with this phrase from Howard Schultz about if it shares your values, then you'll adopt the brand. But then we turn around and say, but we're afraid of it hurting our brand. So I'm just completely confused by that. And even these leaf logos here are not anything similar to what the city currently uses. So, do what you want. I don't like it. I'm just one voice. That doesn't mean, and I guess I'm just disappointed that we are abandoning any sort of, we refuse to sort of acknowledge that the Johnston Town Center, the city government of Johnston is playing a major role in the town center. And all the time and effort we've gone into putting together how we market the city, there's no reflection of that in this town center logo. So that's my disappointment in it, and that's why I really don't like it. But maybe I'll just be a lonely voice on this one.
Well, I'm going to actually agree with Tom. And I just think it's too rigid. We've got the fish that's kind of free flowing. We've got all this other stuff that's kind of free flowing. And then we have this double diamond looking couple squares stacked on top of each other. And I guess I'd like to see something a little more whimsical. When you look at all those others, yeah, even though they're privately owned, they are all kind of whimsical, kind of fun, not so rigid. And anyway, that's my word.
Well, I guess I will chime in and say I'm more ambivalent than Councilman Cope, but I did like what he started talking about. There needs to be a reference to the city in the logo. And I also appreciated Councilman Evans' thoughts about how rigid this logo is. So I don't know what it's going to do to the timeline on a lot of stuff, but they have some good points.
I agree what Councilman Martin said. We need it a little bit more flexible. We need more a logo that actually describes Johnston very well. It's, as Councilman Evans said, it's more rigid at this point.
The only concern that I have about the suggestion that we need to draw the city more into what we do here is that, we do have two things going on here. We do have a public building that is our city government, and that, that serves a particular purpose. The town center is intended to be shopping and entertainment and a place to play. That's different than what we expect to happen at the city hall. And so if we want people to feel comfortable coming here to play and to eat dinner with their friends and to enjoy a movie on the yard, We don't want them to feel like they're coming to a government building. They're coming to a place to play. So that, you know, pulling them too closely together, I think, works against us.
I'll
What we're
give
trying to accomplish with this.
one example perhaps, and even our current logo, I guess, didn't resolve this potential issue, is that speaking with one business that had some interest in the town center, they serve a variety of clients across the metro, and they did have some concern that yes, it's a great amenity, and the city of Johnston's a client, but at the same time, they don't want to be directly associated as part of the government kind of center there, or directly with the city of Johnston, because they work with other municipalities as well. And that's just one business, and they have sort of a particular line of business working with different municipalities. But I think that did enter into our discussions early on that, to your point, right now it's really City Hall and some public amenities out there. But in 10 years, you'll have a variety of different professional services businesses out there, restaurants, and other private businesses, and the brand will be more reflective of who they are, perhaps than the city of Johnston itself. It will be a town center that will have certainly a government presence with the City Hall there and the amphitheater, but it won't be primarily thought of as where City Hall is. That's not to say that we have chosen the perfect logo or anything like that, but I think that perception will evolve over time.
And Adam, if I might chime in, I just want to go back to some of the discussions we had originally when we talked about this. We incorporated the Johnston because we wanted it to kind of feel like this government/public entity. So kind of that Johnston part of town center handled that. The other part of it, people had mentioned whimsical. When we were talking about having a dentist office or a bank or something like that, that might possibly rent some property or lease property there. And they wouldn't necessarily want that more whimsical logo, which is why we came up with the badge that you're seeing right now. And then we use the yard as kind of a secondary icon or mark that you can use for maybe some of those more whimsical town center events where you want it to be more fun. And as you can see, the yard is a little bit more fun. It's got kind of that, what we thought about like the skating rink look. You can kind of look at as like making the tracks and the ice, things like that. So we tried to find the best of both worlds, where we had a little bit more fun and whimsical with the yard, which you could use for some branded items. And then that more, not stuffy, but somebody mentioned rigid mark that you can use. For example, if you were a dentist office, you could be, Dr. Adams Dental at Johnston Town Center, so that you have that credibility where you don't really want to be a whimsical dentist as much, even if you're a dentist for pediatrician, needs. You don't want to be totally whimsical. You want parents to trust you with their kids.
Well, in the interest of
Yeah,
getting to the monument,
we've done quite a bit of social media marketing. Sorry, I was just going to mention there's quite a bit of illustration on the social media feed. So if you want to check that out, that's just a little different vibe too that we've explored. Go ahead, Adam.
Sorry, Joe, did you have? Yeah, so at this point, maybe we'll take a few minutes and pass it off to OPN and talk a little bit about the monument signs, because there are some time constraints in trying to work with that. Joe, maybe you can talk a little bit too about what that timeline process is for getting those monument signs installed, and how any change in the logo might impact how we want to look at how that monument sign looks, or the timeline process for completing those. But I guess maybe my takeaway is we haven't necessarily convinced everybody on council that this is the exact direction that we should be headed, and maybe we need to circle back around again and explore it a little bit further and come back and see if we have any other ideas. But I think our project partner is definitely leaning that this is the way to go, and changing it will cause some issues and some additional expenses, but you know, it's better done now, I guess, than after the signage is done and buildings are complete, if that's what needs to happen.
Adam, this is Joe. I'm going to let Denise kind of chime in too, because a lot of this with the monument sign is kind of collaborative with that team. So she's been doing a lot of the work on this. We originally brought Juicebox in because we wanted to make sure this whole thing was fully integrated. So any new monument signs that we're going to be placing on the site, we wanted to tie them in with designs and architecture that's happening within the buildings, but also within the logos and branding that's going to happen. So that's kind of how this whole thing started a little bit. And obviously the sign itself and the design can happen a certain way, as long as we potentially reserve some square footage on that sign for a logo, if we want a logo, or potentially we go the route where we just eliminate the logo. I think our internal design team preference is to find a way to incorporate it. We feel that that's it's a good branding piece. There's not too many of those other signs that Adam pulled up when we were talking about branding that don't include some form of logo. If nothing else, it's the naming and the font and all those styles that kind of go alongside. So from a timing perspective, obviously we're kind of under the gun at this moment. Ground's moving. I'm trying to get infrastructure like power and lighting and some of that stuff in place for all of these monument signs and locations. But at the same time, as Adam pointed out, we want to get it right. So we'll do what we have to make sure that, this is long-term. We want to get it right, and we don't want to take a swing and end up with a bunt. If I'm using the yard pun appropriately, I'd rather hit a home run. So if we're not there yet, then we're not there yet. That said, we are under the gun. There is time constraints, and there is going to be impact. If Hanson was on the phone now, they'd probably be telling me we need to have some of this stuff a lot sooner. From closing out contracts and other stuff, there's more to it than that. But we can race as fast as we can to try and get to the right answer. So what we are going to show you today is signs that still incorporate the current logo marketing. Obviously, we didn't, from an architect and landscape architect perspective, try and rebrand it for Juicebox. But we are going to show a few options, and then we'll quickly walk through the locations for some of these signs. So at this point, maybe I'll turn it over to Denise. She's still on.
And Cindy, I'm having trouble getting that monument sign one downloaded. Looks like you're maybe trying to find a way to do that for me.
I will tell you that it appears that the issue is on the board doc side, not on our side. So
I believe I have them downloaded. Let me see if I can find them, and maybe I can pull them up and share screen here.
yeah, because I'm having an issue, and we're not in the same place, Adam. So.
Well, this is Denise. I'm with Confluence, so working in collaboration with Joe at OPN on the design of the signs from the standpoint of everything other than the logo and the font. So we're finding the home for the logo and the font, right, in the sign. Maybe while they're trying to figure out how to pull up those images, if Juicebox is still here, could you guys kind of walk through what the timeline was on the original logo design? Because I think that's helpful for the council to understand how long that effort took, and then that plays into what future efforts might look like.
Absolutely. The timeline took several months and several meetings to reach the point that it did. And honestly, we're a little bit worried about moving forward in a different direction just from a cost perspective. There are many things that have waterfalled. So for example, the social media efforts for the town center, the website are all branded with the logo as is now. So if we need to go back to the drawing board, we're kind of months behind if we're literally starting at ground one. And then not to mention the fact that we would have to update everything that has been created to this point, which is going to be not only costly, but also time intensive to get that all updated. So we should maybe keep that in mind as well.
All right, so looks like we've got these up. Do you guys still have the like map that shows location? Awesome. All right, so Adam, if you could maybe kind of circle the monument sign location that we're probably talking about the most. Yeah, so it's right at that entrance off of Merle Hay. This location is where we anticipate the sign is both going to let you know that you've arrived at the Johnston Town Center, and it's going to have that digital component that kind of announces any events that are going on. And it's just kind of that point that pulls you into the development. As you move in, there's going to be other signs that play off of this design. So I think we're kind of just talking about the main monument sign, because once we have our direction resolved on that, it will be easier to resolve the direction on all of the smaller signs from there. But just to help you kind of understand the sequence of signage progression through the site, main monument sign at Merle Hay. As you enter the site, we have one that's labeled WF for wayfinding. So that one will be where you come to that T intersection and it tells you go left for this building or right for that building. City Hall straight ahead. It's going to be a long, low, narrow sign to capture all those different client names and be something that can be added on over time as more buildings populate the site, but also that doesn't get in the way of visual lines so that people enter, they can see the City Hall. That's going to be the best signage of all. It's just a clear sight line. So, so those are a couple there. We're also looking at off of 62nd and 63rd, starting day one with a smaller directional sign. Because day one, we're going to have City Hall and the yard amenities on site. That sign is going to pretty much just direct you to those. So it's going to be much smaller until we come and do some monument signs that can then start to pick up on some of those tenant signs. So those
Hey,
are kind of
Denise,
the.
can I jump in for one
Yeah.
second? With that
Absolutely.
particular sign, if we're looking, especially like at the one at 62nd, I think this would be a good opportunity where we can actually reincorporate the Johnston logos, Johnston City Hall, and direct ties to City Hall and the Johnston logo information directly on that sign. Could be another way. I mean, it's not relogoing or rebranding the Johnston Town Center with the logo, but to make sure that we do get some amenity, city amenity features on some of these signs, I think this would be a good one to do that.
Okay. And then we'll have other kind of smaller signs as you move into the site, things that tell you things like the hours of the ice rink or where to find restrooms or what the rules of the pump track are. So those are all kind of smaller and understandably a little lower priority than figuring out our monument sign. So that's just the general overview of signage placement. And then from there, we've looked at a couple different families of signs that you guys have seen. We landed on, this was family 2 of our original concepts. And then we've just played with kind of morphing it in different orientations for the digital board, how we incorporate the logo and the text. So working this past week with Adam, we just come up with these 3 different ones. The first 2 had both the Johnston Town Center text and logo matching all of the previous work done by Juicebox. And then the third was we kept the text and removed the logo. I think from a design standpoint, the team felt like that was just a little bit too plain, especially with the blocky letter style. So we weren't personally leaning towards that, but we wondered if that solved some problems. So these may not be the final, I don't anticipate them to be the final choices that you'll choose from, but just kind of keeping you guys in the loop on our process of what we're looking at. The lesson learned for me in playing with the different logos and then also playing with even using just the direct Johnston City graphic. It really impacts some of the length and width constraints on the sign. So I think, you know, one of our design theories was, well, maybe we just design the sign and leave them blank until everything gets resolved, and then you just apply whatever logo and text. Unfortunately, it kind of became clear it's not that simple, because your logo might be square, it might be round, it might be rectangular, and it just impacts a lot of different things. So that's the perspective we're coming at it from. So, any questions on all of that?
I like the look of the sign. I think it looks really sharp. I mean, so I think this is really the only issue to be resolved is what to do on the logo side. But I think the ironic thing is that we keep talking about we don't want to emphasize the public nature of this town center, but we're working off of the angle of the roof of and incorporating that into the sign that we're using in the city hall. But I like that. I think that's great. I think that's kind of neat. So again, I just to emphasize this, I guess, again, I'm not saying, and I want to say this again, just to be clear, I'm not saying I want to use the city's logo as this logo. I just wish there was some connectivity to the city logo and this logo. I just don't feel that there is. And second of all, I think we discussed this, you know, at the last work session, which was 2 weeks ago. So I think we provided some direction on this, and now instead of, you know, using that 2 weeks to think of some options, we just have sort of locked in and said, nope, we're going to take it back to the council and see if they'll like it the second time. Well, you know, whatever. So I feel like that's 2 weeks that we've kind of lost. So, but whatever, you know, we'll figure it out.
Councilman Cope, and we're running out of time here, but I'm not sure that that's completely fair, because this is a design that's been out there for quite some time. I believe it was something that was discussed on more than one occasion with the amenities committee that worked on some aspects of the town center. I'm certain that it has come, the appearance of it has come to the city council before as well. I know I'm not the only one that has seen this before, and that there has been presentation and there's been discussion of it. So even before Denise made comments about the timeline and the cost of it, that's what was going through my head, that, you know, it's taken us a long time to get to this point. If we have to start over, which we may have to do, it's going to take time and it's going to cost money. And if we're going to do that, the amenities committee has to get back together again this week and start having this discussion.
Well, I know that we have talked about it, but we also talked about, are we going to call it the yard? Are we going to call it the green? Blah, blah, blah. Lots of different things as part of those discussions, I think, as Adam sort of talked about earlier. Again, somebody will just have to make a decision if we're going to keep reviewing this or look at some changes based on the feedback you've gotten, or are we just going to kind of, you know, push forward and try to convince everybody that this is the right answer. Well, you know, that's somebody else gets to make that decision. So.
Adam, did we have anything else that we needed to discuss tonight?
That is the only thing we have on the work session here.
Okay. Well, I think we need to pull the amenities committee back together again and have a quick conversation about logo and see where we're at with that, and come back with a recommendation to the council as quickly as possible.
Very good. We'll get something scheduled.
Okay. Okay, anything else for the work session? If not, we'll adjourn and we'll come back momentarily into the council meeting.
Are we using the same, do we just stay on this line, or do we have to log into a different one?
We have a different
log in. It is on the agenda too on board docs. If anyone doesn't have the email, the link is on the agenda itself.